All right, we might as well check things off, everyone. Thank you for joining us here today. Welcome. Hope you're all enjoying the show so far. My name is Mike Prestige. I'm a pre-sales technical solutions consultant for HP Poly. Today the topic here is the big debate, right? Android versus Windows in terms of Microsoft Teams rooms. We all know over the last 3 or 4 years we've seen a lot of change happen, and many of us have embraced the hybrid work lifestyle now. And in fact, you know, a lot of us have probably gone through, upgraded our work from home environments, new displays, new kit. And I mean, for me personally, and I think in a lot of other cases, our at-home environment is now probably superior to what we get if we're in the office at work. It's leading a lot of companies to look at, you know, their existing room fit outs, their existing strategy around hybrid work. And, you know, they're looking at how they optimize the experience for their staff when they come back into the office. They're looking at the meeting rooms, what gear is included in those rooms, how do they provide that great audio and video experience for their staff. One of the key decision points as part of that process is which operating system do we use, which device we put into the rooms, and hence the topic for today, the big debate, Android versus Windows. So I'm going to touch a little bit around on history and the underlying journey that has taken us here today. We're going to look at some of the industry trends that we're seeing locally. We'll talk about, you know, which operating system is right for me, which one should I be using and choosing, and then some of the underlying decision points that go into making that choice, right? Platform flexibility, form factor and deployment considerations for each of those platforms, the supported room sizes and types, some of the features and functionalities across those two platforms. We'll touch a little bit on what HP and Poly are doing and bringing in terms of innovation. And then we're going to get some of our guests on stage here and have a little bit of a chat, get some of their thoughts and feedback around, you know, decisions that they're seeing made in the market, and you know, in terms of what customers are doing with their approach. So in terms of the history, how we've gotten to where we are now, I thought I'd start with a little bit around UC&C journey that they've had. Along the top line that you can see is the underlying platform that Microsoft have had, and on the bottom line it shows when the room systems were introduced. So the very first dedicated room system for Microsoft was actually the Link room system, and it was introduced by Polycom in 2011, and it was running on Windows 7 as the underlying OS. Fast forward a wee bit, 5 years later, Skype for Business has been introduced, and the first Skype room systems started getting released in 2016. Following that, in 2017, Microsoft Teams was announced, and in 2018, the first Teams rooms on Windows were released. In 2019, Polycom and Microsoft jointly announced Teams rooms on Android, and that was with the Studio X series. At the time, they were called collaboration bars. And it was only in 2020 that about the middle of the year, that the first Teams room on Android application was released. So if you put that sort of timeline into perspective, we've had close to 5 years now with native Teams rooms on Windows, and around about 3 years on Android. I want to look at the industry trends that we're seeing. And I'm going to put, in terms of room solutions, I'm going to put the Surface Hub to the side as more of a solution that's in that meet and collaborate space. With that aside, we have two main solutions in market, and that's Teams rooms on Windows and Teams rooms on Android. About 2 years ago, so after the Android application had been in market for about 12 months, the statistics were showing Windows accounted for around about 2/3 of the room systems that were being sold and deployed. In the last kind of 12 months or more, sort of, you know, 2022, those stats evened up a lot more, and we were seeing around about a 50-50 share in terms of rooms on Windows versus rooms on Android. And then just recently, particularly in the ANZ region, you're starting to see a trend towards an increasing adoption in Android. So the big question is, which operating system should I choose? And the answer is, it depends. There's a lot of factors that should go into making that decision, and it's not just purely based on which operating system is leveraged underneath that. We've only got 45 minutes here today, and you can see the long list of decision points and factors that should be considered, right? I'm not going to cover them all off, and I'm not going to go into any great depth, but I'll touch on some of the key ones that should be taken into account. Recent research conducted by an enterprise strategy group indicates around about 91% of companies are using at least 2 communications and collaborations platforms, and around about 72% are using 3 or more. So a good starting point when companies are looking at what to put into their meeting rooms is to consider their preferred communications platform. Not all platforms will support both Windows and Android in terms of the underlying operating system. So, give you an example of why this is important. You may have had a customer or a company that was leveraging Zoom rooms prior to COVID kicking in. And, we fast forward 3 or 4 years now, and that company has adopted Microsoft Teams as their desktop strategy, and they're looking to consolidate their overall strategy around unified comms, moving towards native Teams. If those room systems that they had deployed for Zoom were based on Windows as the compute, then more often than not, you'll find we don't have the ability to re-image those PCs and leverage a different application on them. Either the underlying hardware specs may not be supported or certified, maybe the OEM vendors prevent those machines being re-imaged to a different application, or it may just void the warranty and support on those. If that customer had deployed Android devices, and an example would be, our Studio X series, then, more often than not, the application that they want to move to, like Microsoft Teams, is already supported and certified on that Android platform. And it's a relatively easy task to switch. If we look at form factor and deployment considerations, Windows-based systems typically leverage the PC for the compute, right? And then they have USB-based peripherals for your mics, your speakers, your cameras. These PC-based solutions generally provide greater flexibility around that choice of peripherals, especially when you come into those large meeting spaces or those customized environments. With that flexibility, though, come additional deployment considerations, cabling requirements, complexity, etc. So that does need to be taken into account. And you've also got to look at, the management of those additional peripherals. If you get into some of the complex environments where you're using specialized mics, DSPs, etc., then you've often got additional management platforms as well. In the simpler environment, the nice thing from a management perspective is that Microsoft wraps it all up. The peripherals are generally managed all through Teams Admin Center or the Pro Portal as well. On the Windows platform, if you do need BYOD, bring your own device capability to support, native meetings on other platforms, then that typically means you need to leverage additional hardware in those rooms. So you're deploying something like USB switches, etc., to support that capability. If we look at Android as a platform, they're typically available in the all-in-one form factor, the video bars. So they're a lot easier and simpler to install. Less components means less cabling requirements, less complexity, and generally just a quicker deployment. It's a single device to manage. Everything's built into it, so you're not managing peripherals individually. But given that it's Android, sometimes customers will need to leverage both the Microsoft and the OEM vendor management platforms to get some of the advanced management capability from the devices. Lastly, on the Android platform, some vendors like HP Poly, we bake BYOD support into their underlying Android operating system, so there's no additional hardware requirements to enable that. If we switch to supported room sizes and types, then a key requirement or a key consideration is the devices that are going to be going into those rooms, right? Small rooms tend to have fewer end user requirements, and so it's a lot easier to cater for those small rooms with the Android-based all-in-one devices. Some of the larger rooms, multi-purpose rooms, customized rooms, tend to lend themselves more to the Windows-based platform, where you've got your choice of peripherals, a much wider choice of peripherals. And if you're looking at third-party integration, again, that platform tends to support more options. This is also where your choice of OEM hardware vendor can come into the mix and plays an important part, as not all OEM vendors support solutions in all of these categories. As you can see from an HP Poly perspective, we have solutions that can cater for any size of room on either platform. This is today's eye chart test. I got told I should include one of these. I think that's the rule.
The opposite, actually, Mike.
Oh, the opposite. Oh, sorry, mate. So, I mean, the slide here, it's not for you to read, especially not from the back of the room. The slide here is focusing on features and functionality, and it's a key consideration when looking at what device goes into the rooms. What are the end user requirements? What are my workflows? What features and functionality do I need supported? Some of the recent differences and innovations that have been included in latest releases from Microsoft include things like SIP and H323 calling support on Windows, right? And that's through our CVI partners like Pixip. We tend to see features being released on Windows first and eventually following on Android. It's a general trend that we've seen in market. I'm not going to go into any of these in great depth. Microsoft do publish their feature comparison table between Windows and Android online, and as I said, it is a key thing to keep in mind when you're making decisions about what goes into which room. If you're waiting on features to be released, look at Microsoft's roadmap. Typically, they'll publish a short period of time in front around what new features and functionality are coming, and you'll be able to see when the estimated time is going to arrive for both Windows and Android. Sometimes that may be a key decision point. What I will say is, despite Microsoft tending to develop and release features on Windows first, we have seen a lot of acceleration in terms of the features and functionality getting released on Android over the last 12 months. There's a lot more being packed into that application development.
I'll just add really quickly, because it came up this morning. Ilya from Microsoft spoke specifically about this, and he said exactly what you said, that they've gotten better at trying to catch up, but he does expect that gap to maybe extend a little bit again because of all the AI functionality. So Windows will probably start having, again, a bigger feature set than currently, except for management, because they are completely focused on getting the Android managed toolkit with parity for the Windows kit. So all that functionality will be there. The actual in-room functionality, the gap might get a little bit bigger.
Does that extend to all Android platforms, or is it specific to Microsoft's new flavor of Android in terms of the management?
He didn't get into that detail. He just said to manage your Android teams on Android devices.
Yeah, good.
I don't think so. He didn't get into the weeds on that, but I'm sure we can call him back and ask him.
Yeah. Nice. Beyond the features and functionality that Microsoft releases as part of their application, you also have OEM vendors differentiating themselves with the innovation from an audio and video perspective in their devices. And HP Poly is one of the industry leaders in this area. From an audio and video perspective, we make sure that our room solutions are ensuring people are both seen and heard clearly on the calls. Good audio remains one of the key factors for any meeting. It's a key priority. And from a Poly perspective, we leverage next generation beamforming microphones to make sure that everybody in the room is heard clearly. We have technology we layer on top of that, such as noise block AI, and that's really around removing the distracting background sounds and eliminating that from the call. And then beyond that, in those tricky environments, we can layer acoustic fence, whereby we can define a virtual boundary, and any noises originating outside of that boundary can essentially be ignored by our devices. On the video side, we understand that the underlying purpose of a meeting may change. And a good example or a way to describe this is, in a meeting room where you might have 3 to 5 people around a table interacting with the far end. From a camera framing perspective, group framing would probably deliver the best experience in that environment versus speaker framing if you've got 1 or 2 main presenters and you want the focus from a video perspective just to be on them. These innovations that we're building into our devices are available across both platforms, both Windows and Android. I'd like to touch on a couple of new innovations that we've also just recently added on our Android platform. So these were included as part of our 4.1 OS release last week. The first feature is called Director AI Perimeter, and it's part of our existing Poly Director AI. It allows an installer or an administrator to define a virtual boundary within the conference room, and only faces within that area are used from a camera framing perspective. That means we can reduce some of the distractions from a productive meeting. So examples of this would include, your modern office spaces where you've got meetings with glass walls all around them, people standing outside the rooms, and traditionally cameras are looking for faces. Doesn't matter if they're on the outside of the room or not, it'll still include them in that shot, in that view. Open plan office spaces where you're having a stand-up meeting. In those spaces, there's always people in the surrounding environments. And again, there's no way to, in an open plan, there's no way to define, the boundary of your meeting. If people are, on the edges of your call, they'll be included and they'll be seen from the far end. And that's a distraction for the overall call. A third example would be, we've got some customers who have had traditionally images printed on the walls with people's faces, and you kick a meeting off and, they're always a participant in the call. The camera frames them as well. They can be excluded now. They can be prevented from being part of your meeting, and so they're no longer a distraction. The second enhancement that we included in that 4.1 update is called sound reflection reduction. And the idea here is in rooms, again, like, where you've got 4 glass walls, we have the ability to remove some of that significant reverberation that occurs in those spaces. It's about maintaining the sound of natural speech. You don't need to worry about, poor audio performance in some of those rooms anymore. Participants sound closer and clearer to the far end. There's fewer meeting disruptions, and you can communicate without some of that distraction where people are asking you to repeat yourself. This also means in some instances you don't need to spend money on those complex microphone arrays and DSPs to get better audio. Both of these features are being enabled within our existing Poly systems certified for Microsoft Teams, so Studio X Series and G7500. I've got 3 more things that I want to touch on before we get our guests up on stage to get some of their views. Security management and support, and I think these are 3 big factors for a lot of organizations looking to deploy native rooms. With the shift from traditional video systems, H323 and SIP-based calling systems. We've moved to native Teams rooms, which are network connected, and security has definitely become an increasing factor in the consideration of what to deploy. The good news is, Microsoft and the certified OEM vendors have done a lot of work to ensure both Windows and Android platforms are inherently secure. They cover hardware, security of the hardware, the software, at an account level and at the network layer. I know a lot of customers, some of their security teams look at the Android platform and they are a little bit more cautious about it. I think it's more just potentially a little lack of understanding. It's not the same as your Android sort of devices that you carry around with you in your pockets. These devices are locked down. There's no access or ability to load other applications. Essentially, security and compliance is enforced at every layer. The underlying recommendation from Microsoft is really to look at both Windows and Android devices as secure appliances. For anyone wanting to dive a bit deeper into some of the security aspects, Microsoft do go into it in depth online, right? And I suggest you can look at their documentation. It is very good. With that shift to network-based or network-connected systems, one of the other shifts we're seeing is away from support of those rooms, right? Moving away from your traditional kind of AV teams supporting those rooms, and now it's your IT administrators and your IT managers who are responsible for that support. So what options do they have? One option is to take a hands-off approach. Let the built-in operating system manage the updates. Keep the underlying OS and applications up to date. Windows does this through a script that runs at 2 a.m. every morning. Downloads, applies any updates, and keeps all the peripherals, etc., up to date. On the Android side, once you've registered it into Teams, you can enable automatic updates for those devices. And again, underlying OS as well as the Teams applications are automatically updated. For those customers who want a bit more of a hands-on approach to managing these devices, there are a number of options available. If you're leveraging the Teams Room Pro license, you get the ability to look at leveraging tools like Microsoft Intune. You've got that greater level of granular control over the security and policies applied. Both platforms can be monitored and managed through Microsoft's native management tools, Teams Admin Center. And again, if you're leveraging the Pro licensing, the Pro portal, these native Microsoft management tools support both Windows and Android systems. On the Android side, on the Windows side, they provide a lot more granular level of visibility and monitoring currently. But I guess to your point, Kai, you're saying, from a management perspective, on the Android.
The point of saying that they expect within this year to have all the same granular controls for management for Android and Windows in Pro Portal.
That's great. That's great to hear. Because today, and for the past sort of few years, typically if you've gone down the path of leveraging Android, quite often customers would have to supplement, the native Teams, native Microsoft management tools with OEM vendor platforms. Right, support. So when it comes to support of these overall systems, of the room systems, it's worth comparing the ongoing support and that's available from each of the OEM hardware vendors. Not all support is equal, and to ensure, not just the best experience for the end users, but also for those who are supporting these room systems, the IT administrators, etc. You want to make sure that they have a good experience with the devices from a support perspective. You want to make sure that the life expectancy of these devices is as good as you can get, and ultimately the return on investment that you've made is as good as you can get. And I think this is where it's important to look at which OEM vendor you're going with for these solutions. Some OEM vendors only offer the ability at the time of purchase to extend support. sometimes only to a maximum of 3 years. HP Poly, I think we do a pretty good job from a support perspective. We offer the ability to extend for up to 5 years, and it doesn't need to be at the time of support. It can be added later. In summary, many organisations today are looking at deploying native Teams room solutions, and they're discovering that a mixed environment, a mixed operating system environment, can be effectively implemented across different meeting spaces. It's perhaps more important to standardise on a single vendor approach, looking at the room system and the peripherals, wrapping them up together, ensuring a consistent, good experience, not just for end users, but as I said before, for those who are supporting those room systems. As we've seen and heard today, Windows is a great platform to consider when you're looking at flexibility of peripherals supported. Some of those, trickier environments, customized spaces, etc. Extra large meeting rooms, multi-purpose rooms. And if you're looking at, new features that are coming up on the roadmap, about to be released, if those are critical features for you, then Windows is likely to be the platform, particularly from an AI perspective, as we heard. On the other hand, if you're looking at all-in-one simplicity, ease of deployment, then Android may be the best solution for those spaces. Minimal cabling requirements, right? Speed of deployment in some of those remote areas. And not to mention some of the cost efficiencies that Android tends to have as well. They're typically in those smaller and medium-sized spaces. They sit at a lower price point. So that's the gist of the content for today. I'd like to invite some of my colleagues up here on stage to have a bit of a chat and share their thoughts and views and some of their experiences that they've had.
Excellent. Round of applause for Mike. You've got to appreciate how hard he found it, presenting on a competing laptop and using a competing USB device. So well done.
Thanks.
Okay, so we're going to invite our panelists up. I'd like to invite Ian Darby, Brennan Kwok, and Mike Finn. Oh, sorry,
Mike.
Yeah, sorry.
It's my brother here.
Yeah.
Mike.
And you're welcome to join in as well. So we're just going to take the next.
Everyone mode attendees hand these mics over to the guys.
Super light. So just for the next 15 minutes, we've got a few questions, and then we'd welcome any questions from the audience as well. But first of all, a quick introduction to the audience, and also if there was anything that resonated in particular from Mike's content as well. And maybe we'll go with our customer first. Ian, if you'd like to say hello.
Yeah, hello. It's a bit weird. It's
To the remote.
yeah, okay, it's remote. My name's Ian Darby. I'm with Air New Zealand. I look after all of our meeting spaces. We've got 300 meeting spaces across our business in New Zealand and offshore. We've embarked on probably a 2-year journey so far around everything Mike's just been talking about today. We've got a smattering of Windows rooms. We've got about 7 of those. We've currently got 90 Android Teams rooms, and now we're just going through and going to some of the customised spaces and hangars and workshops and things like that, building some more Windows rooms because of the unique requirements, particularly around audio and those sorts of spaces. So I sort of everything Mike spoke about resonated with me, and the approach that we took was really based around a lot of those key decisions. A lot of the Android rooms we've done to date have just been cookie cut, whether it's small, medium, large, and we've sort of ticked those off, and now we're sort of moving into that more bespoke space in terms of our Windows-based Teams rooms.
Great. Hey everyone, I'm Nick Finn. I run the pre-sales solution engineering team for HP Poly. So I'm actually Mike's boss, so good job, Mike. Well done. Yeah. Yeah, well, we're HP now, so you know. Yeah, so I think actually what resonated with me was this whole we're back kind of teetotaling back to the Windows side of the house a little bit at the moment, right? That's what I got out of that. Just in terms of, I know, Microsoft everyone's big into this AI space now, right? And so definitely Microsoft are pushing that area hard. So it's interesting to hear that, that Windows will kind of get those features first. But at the same time, from an OEM vendor perspective, because we own that whole platform in a sense, except the Teams APK, of course, we can actually deliver innovations a bit quicker on Android. So that's the kind of the differences there, and we can talk more on that in a bit if you like. Over to you, Brennan.
Hey everyone, welcome and thanks for coming. My name is Brennan. I'm actually based in Singapore, so it's flew here last night. It's great to be in Sydney. I'm the principal solution architect for Microsoft for Poly HP. I've been in Poly HP for now 13 years, and I've been awarded Microsoft MVP for the last 11 consecutive years as well. So I'm here to give you my perspective of Android versus Windows. But also, I really want to hear your feedback on what you think of what Poly is doing in terms of our products and our innovations. As the principal architect, I have the unique privilege of working very closely with my product engineering group. So we have a very close contact with them every month. We have regular calls with them. So I really want to hear what you think Poly should be doing, what Poly should stop doing, or and really how we can actually give you products that you want, right? So I'm really hoping to hear that feedback that I can bring back to my engineering team as well. Yeah.
Excellent, thank you. We've got a lot to cover in the next 15 minutes, I think. The first question, and we'll go to yourself, Ian, first, but in terms of your journey and when you were making decisions on whether to go with an Android or Windows-based room, were there any kind of key things that impacted your decision?
Yeah, I think the main one was just simplicity. The form factor of them, the installation time, and a reasonably secure network, the ability to to get those deployed reasonably quickly without going through a whole lot of security processes, in-tune enrollment and things like that. All of that sort of stuff takes quite a bit of time in our environment. So yeah, simplicity was the key one for us, and also maintaining them as well. So they're easy to get to if you've got an issue. The devices aren't hidden in cupboards; they're right in front of you. So so the form factor was a big selling point. Yeah, and the reliability. I can honestly say we haven't had one failure in all of the devices we've deployed to date. So hats off to the engineers in terms of building the hardware. It's been very pleasant from that perspective, from our perspective.
Yeah, excellent. And I think when you're deploying that number of rooms, so simplicity and serviceability as well, it's really going to help.
Yeah, it is. And particularly when you're back a certain product and a certain vendor, you're in the spotlight a bit. So what really, when we get, even internally, we get under pressure from, other parts of the business around looking at other alternative solutions. And I think what sold it for a lot of our leadership group was they went up to Microsoft in Seattle and saw that they were running the same kit that we had just put in. So that was a relief for me.
No, excellent. Good endorsement.
Yeah.
Nick or Brennan, any customer stories where there's certain things that have made that decision towards either Android or Windows?
I can answer first. Look, I've seen both sides of the house, right? I've you think about organisations that take security really seriously, like government and FSI, right? Financial services. You kind of think maybe the four big banks in Australia would shy away from Android because Android's got this, it's Android, it might not be as secure, but some of them are all in on Android, so it's actually the opposite. So it's important just to have that, to be educated and have that conversation with Microsoft and get the InfoSec teams together and just be aware that it's maybe not what you think it is, right? Yeah, Brendan, you got any comments?
Yeah, it's interesting what you mentioned about security, and I have similarly customers in the financial space, and they are very concerned about security. And I think it's more towards that their CS security officer and their security team is just more familiar with Windows security than they are with Android security. And so for that reason, even though there is no specific policy to go with only Windows, they'd rather just take the safer approach and go with Windows. So if anything goes wrong, they know how to fix it. Right? And so for security reasons, they might go with Windows. But I've also seen customers that are completely the opposite, right? Recently, we just deployed for a very major law firm, a very famous one, 7 meeting rooms, all with Studio X70s, and they go all with Android, right? And the reason is because they like the simplicity of a single video bar, everything included. We could pair a Trio T60 if the room is really big, over the network, and so for them, Android was the really obvious choice. It was just easy to install. Everything was all in one rather than modular system. At the same time, we have customers that actually, I've seen customers deploy both in the sense that you're not limited to just one or the other. I have customers that actually deploy Android for their small, medium rooms. And for the large rooms, the divisible rooms, flexible rooms, they go with Windows simply because in the Windows space, you can do very flexible customization with a lot of third-party controls and things like that. So things that you can't do normally with an Android all-in-one bar. So really, the choice really depends, and it's different across customer segments and across industries, across regions. So really, it's to understand what they want, propose something that is really ideal and suitable for them. I've had a customer that purely went with Android because they were so, to them, interior look and interior design is so important, right? They're basically a beauty, cosmetic company. Okay, I wouldn't name, it's a very famous brand. And we showed them the Windows solution, and just the fact that we needed 4 cables from the tabletop controller, they said, no way, right? They just want the table to be super clean, no messy cables, nothing whatsoever. So Android was also the obvious choice, right? So really, different customers really have different what's important for them.
Yeah, look, one really important point that I'd make is, a complex room is a complex room. So smaller spaces, you can go with this cookie cut approach. It's much simpler, right? Small, huddle, small, medium. It's really kind of easy and straightforward, except if you've got a glass box, which we see all the time, really bad for acoustics. There's a plug for sound reflection reduction, test it out. So once you get into these larger spaces, these bespoke spaces, it doesn't matter if it's Windows or Android, it's complex, right? Especially from an audio point of view, getting the audio right, you've got to work with DSPs, you've got to work with, maybe some ceiling microphone arrays, you've got to tune them up. It's not easy even for a experienced AV installer. And I would just advise people just to be careful and make sure they're deploying the right kit and to talk to everyone involved. Definitely talk to us, talk to the vendor, and make sure that what they're deploying with our kit has been tested by our engineering, because it's often not the case, right? And then we get called in to support it, and we look under the covers, and we're like, sorry guys, you're using something we actually haven't validated yet. So, yeah. Complexity is complexity, I suppose, is the point.
Yeah, excellent. Some really good answer. Thank you. Final question, and it's really on around the topic of innovation. So I think for those of you that have already gone around some of the exhibitor stands and also listened to some of the content already, the theme around AI, intelligence in the meeting space, but also I think the speed of innovation and what we're seeing over the next 6 months to a year is going to be dramatically different from what we've seen maybe in the last 3 years. And so the next question for the panel is, given all of the innovation that's happening, would that influence your decision on whether recommending or moving forward with Android versus Windows? Maybe Brennan, we'll go to you first, just to switch the order.
Yeah, I think Ilya did state that point very clearly in his fireside chat, that a lot of the AI features that Microsoft is going to be putting out in terms of Copilot, Teams Premium, Meeting Recap, intelligent cameras, all this will come to Windows, and they are coming to Windows. in the very near future. Probably like what he mentioned, the gap may then be, the feature gap between Android and Windows will be slightly more because this will come to Android at a much later date. But certainly Poly is not really stopping, not going to stop Poly rather from innovating as well. So you've seen a lot of the Poly directed AI features that Mike just mentioned earlier on, things like the perimeter AI, the noise reverb reduction. These are all features that we continue to innovate on to benefit our customers, to really address real world problems. And at the same time, Microsoft is also pushing ahead with AI with all these Copilot features. And so I think at the end of the day, it's really the customers and they're going to benefit from all this innovation. And they're going to be the big differentiator, right, among all the different vendors today. So definitely AI is the new frontier. Poly is pushing ahead. Microsoft is pushing ahead. So we're just going to see this space going to be developing very, very quickly in the future months to come.
Yeah, so if I was a buyer, if I was a customer buyer, I'd probably, I mean, there's a lot going on in this space, right? Everyone's talking about AI and ChatGPT and autopilot and all this stuff. I mean, it's actually a lot of noise around it, I think now. So if I was a buyer, which I'm not, I'd be looking carefully at the use cases, my use cases, what makes sense for my organisation. Do I need some of these features? And that would dictate, which path I'd go in terms of a fast adoption versus slower adoption and trying out the different spaces. So I suppose the good news is if a lot of the OEM vendors will just bake it in anyway, right? So you just get it with a software upgrade, and it's up to you whether you enable it or not, right?
What I'd like to see more in Android, of course, because we've got a lot of those now, but I think it is what it is. In terms of innovation, which is key for us, is we changed as a business last year to run an agile framework in terms of how we operate the airline these days, which means we have a lot of meetings which are actually in open plan spaces, so outside of meeting rooms, and that is a difficult space to be in terms of audio, I can tell you. So I'd like to see more innovation in that space, and we are seeing it with, I know with the tracking and the camera, but being able to, even the acoustic fence feature, which we've run on a lot of our stand-up areas, those sort of things make a huge difference. And as I think Nick said before, you can't underestimate the audio piece. It is the most key piece. It's the most perceptive piece in terms of communication. So don't ever underestimate that. And any innovation in that space to cut out background noise and put a perimeter around your area that you want to mic up is just really key, I think. And the other one I would make a comment around is management. When you've got a large fleet of rooms and spaces, being able to manage them effectively and remotely is huge. So I'm really looking forward to all of the new updates for the Android management, particularly pairing of the touch panels remotely would be fantastic.
Yeah, I agree. And it's interesting around that innovation piece around focusing on some of the simpler stuff and some of the management and configuration and things, and then as well as the advanced. And I think most of all, you can see it happening both at the device level and then also in the cloud as well.
You got time?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I was intrigued by Ian's rationale and coming up with the Android platform, and I saw the trending was more going towards Android. I'm in channel management, and I'm just wondering from working with our channel partners, is it fair to say that Android is more driven into its simplicity, this complexity, more in the SMB mid-market rather than the complex, mid-market to enterprise? Is the trending is the SMB market is turning over the products a lot more quickly and it's more widespread, and as you're seeing the Android trending upwards? I'm just wanting to get some feedback from a market perspective.
I think I'll comment there around in terms of the involvement from our sort of end user compute part of our business who look after our desktop, there's basically little or no involvement from them because we've got a large Android base. Obviously InfoSec, and cybersecurity have a say in it, of course, but and that's the attractive thing for me is we can containerise it in a large organisation, but certainly for a small organisation, an SMB who don't have the IT resources, it's a lot simpler. Hell of a lot simpler.
I just want to know where there's smarts about where the Android trending is. Is it SMB? Do we know?
Definitely large corporates adopting a lot of
Yeah.
Because it's making their job easier. It's more.
I think it's both. Yeah, I think it's both. I mean, Microsoft probably won't share those details at a granular level with us, I don't think. Yeah, I think it's both. But, when you look at the trend, look at the mobile phone market, right? We had a massive upsurge in iPhone when iPhone was released, right? And now it's Android kind of dominates, and it's a similar type of story, right? And then definitely in price sensitive markets, like I'm talking about Asia now, right? Definitely Android's much more in favour in those sort of markets. Right?
You've also got to look at the support of it. You've got one vendor, that's got the whole thing. It's a turnkey solution rather than particularly, you could have 4 or 5 vendors for the same solution.
On Windows, it's more complex and more flexible, more versatile, but there's a lot more vectors for issues. Like I think we've all seen Windows will push an update, will work with 3 OEMs devices, and then another couple it's going to break and you've got 3 weeks of hell until you get a patch out.
But on the other hand, I think in terms of defects, bug fixes, I think Microsoft might be quicker at delivering them on Windows than Android, right? So pros and cons.
Question? And we'll
room controls in a small space where you probably want to deploy an Android base over one bar, but you want to enable lighting controls, for example. Is that something where you have to go with Windows, the Windows deployment, or is there room controls, push controls coming on Microsoft Teams on Android as well?
Yeah, that is an excellent question. And I think if we are talking about rooms that just require environmental controls, lightings, HVAC controls, we can already do that with all-in-one bars, right? With like Poly, we work together with Extron. So Extron has got their controllers integrated with our controller. So you don't need to have a separate controller for that. You can use our touch controller, TC8 or TC10, and it will present the Extron controls for you to control your lightings, your humidity, your shades and stuff like that. But the more complex rooms that I was referring to that more suitable for Windows are where you really need a modular system. For example, you have a room that can be divided into 2 rooms, right? And can be combined to a single room, right? And you may have 2 rooms being used as separate rooms, but sometimes you may want to remove the partition and use it as a big room, and you actually combine 2 NTR systems into one. And so for that, I think on the Windows side, there is a very well documented solutions that we have been doing in the past. From the Android piece, all-in-one bars are not going to work, but we do have something called the modular room system. We have the G7500 codec, which could possibly do that, but there are also limited expansion capability or expansion ports on that Android device. So Windows is still a more flexible choice when it comes to those complex rooms with divisible rooms or very, very large auditoriums where you have require a lot of multiple, ceiling microphones and tabletop microphones and stuff like that.
Nothing fundamentally about Windows that allows you to do that.
Correct.
It's about the peripherals.
Correct.
So
Correct.
support of the peripherals.
Yes, correct. So Nathan from Jenny would know very, very well about this. Yeah. Correct. Correct.
Is it HP Extron
Yeah.
solution that's kind of like
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah.
systems.
Yeah.
Even on Windows, it's a page flip as well.
But Zoom is built in.
The MTR application.
Yeah.
Is that coming?
I have not heard that. So.
I've heard comments about improvements in how we can get better integration, maybe some standalone buttons.
There's definitely more APIs available every couple of months, so Microsoft are opening up more things, but I've not heard anything about a native integration for it. I think it's too big an area for Microsoft to take on it because it's a whole market.
Speaking of Extron specifically, it is context driven. So you can do room controls when you, for instance, join a meeting or mute a call, things like that.
Yeah.
You can drop projector screens when you touch.
Yeah.
So they are.
I can share one example of Extron being very useful. Like we had a bank recently, they threw out a tender and they wanted our touch controller, the GC8, to actually have user guides. So like you would, for example, if a user plugs in a USB cable to the laptop, for either presentation or VRD mode, there'll be a voice saying that, oh, action is required or your attention is required on the controller. And the user goes to the controller and there's instructions like if you want to do VRD, connect this, press this. If you're doing presentation, connect this and press this. So they wanted all these guides on the panel itself to be electronic. And so using Extron's controller, we could customize web pages to actually help the user use the system, have the user guides. And I've also seen Extron you can order coffee, from the panel itself, integrate with the cafe, for example. So when you use Extron's external controller, there's a lot of flexibility that you can do. Whereas if it's built in to the app like Zoom, there's not much you can customize in terms of the controls.
Excellent. We're going to move on. As you can see, the debate still goes on. So I appreciate all of the questions and also the time that you spent with us. Big round of applause for our panelists. Thank you very much. To finish up on, in terms of a call to action, from an HP perspective, we have a really good program called My First Room. This is via our channel partners. So if you're a partner with us, it's something that you have access to. And it's designed for our customers to give them access at a very special price, their first Teams room. And so that's for anyone who hasn't looked at a Teams room before. And also, you see just down the bottom there, it also comes with, as Microsoft are providing a 60-day up to 25 license free trial as well. That's kind of really giving our customers the opportunity to look at Teams Room, and that's available neutral, both on Android and Windows devices. The second program that we have is a trade-in program, and that's if you've got older systems, either from HP or equally from some of the other OEM vendors. There's a great opportunity to upgrade, and that's really to be able to take advantage of some of the amazing innovation that's going on. And so the final piece, if you really want to see some of the innovation that's happening, then please take the opportunity to come down to our stand. There's a big one in the middle, and we've got a huge race car from Red Bull Formula One. You can't miss it. But we've got all of our solution engineers are there, and would welcome the opportunity to walk you through some of the innovation that's coming. So thank you very much. A big round of applause again for Mike presenting,
Thank you.
Ian, Nick and Brennan. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I like these mics.